You would have thought that that process would be more buttoned up in some dealers versus maybe a smaller geographic with, maybe a lower end car brand. It's not the case. I remember going in, it was a Jaguar dealership, and sitting down with the general manager's desk, he pulls out a statement. I about fell out of my chair when he was paying close to 4%.
Today, I'm thrilled to chat with Julie Douglas, CEO of DealerPay, a streamlined payment software designed specifically for car dealerships. We discuss how car dealerships are unknowingly leaving millions on the table and the trends she's seeing with customer down payments. A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible: CDK Global, CDG Recruiting, and DealerPay. And now, let's get into the show. Julie Douglas on the CDG podcast. Julie, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Good to have you on. I'm excited to chat, hear a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, also dig into a part of the business that I'll admit I'm pretty ignorant about. I don't know too much about payments, sort of the finances that go on behind the operations of a dealership. And so I think that this is going to be very insightful. I want to get started a little bit about yourself as usual. I did a little fair bit of research here, so I have a little intel. I heard that your foray into the entrepreneurial journey was a little bit atypical. Can you tell us a little bit about your start in this business?
Sure. So I started young, obviously in sales. I guess I just have a knack for it, but I actually started selling copy machines in my early 20s. I worked for Icon Office Solutions in St. Louis, and I went in business to business, cold calling, slinging those big copy machines back in the 90s. So started there, but then from there, I moved on to payments. I was actually recruited from Global Payments, which is one of the biggest providers out there. I ran their auto dealer vertical for about 10 and a half years. So that was awesome for me at the time. I was extremely successful, working for a large company that had, a lot of the market share and really wanted to get in the dealer space. And that's really where I found my niche. Sold my first Nissan dealership in St. Louis when I was 23 years old. And I still have that group today.
So you sort of got into automotive by way of the prior company you were at. And you didn't have any connecting thread to automotive. Is that right? That was the vertical you were assigned and you just, say, hey, I'm going to learn this.
Well, I wasn't even assigned it. I just cold called a Nissan dealership, walked in the door and said, this is what we should talk about today. I love those guys. Bommarito Automotive Group, one of my most favorite groups in St. Louis. I still work with them today, but yeah, they were wonderful. And, I started to see some of the benefits of working in the dealership space just because of the volumes, the high average tickets. So I was making a little money. And I grew it for Global Payments for, till about 750 dealers in 10 and a half years. So I hate to say it, but I had to go. The company itself just really wasn't supporting the technology part of the space. And, they were not supporting them. So.
Okay. Now, before we talk about the catalyst that led to you becoming an entrepreneur, what was the problem that you identified in our industry?
Sure. So dealerships, especially with respect to payments, it's just a commodity, right? It was a price game. What provider could come in at the lowest price to win the business? The problem in the industry is there were no actual solutions or technology behind it. So for example, a dealership had standalone terminals and a cashier's office, and that was really all they knew. One of the things that I wanted to bring to the table was more of a way to solve their problems with respect to payment acceptance. So as much as I pushed with Global Payments to sort of get on board to do that, it was really hard to get a big corporation like them to sort of get in the weeds with me and start identifying certain issues that happen in different departments, from sales to finance to accounting. So that's when, after my 10 and a half year stint, I decided to move on, and I did so.
And why did you decide to move on? Right? Like you couldn't do this where you were at, or what was the reasoning for that?
Well, I was starting to lose business, to be honest with you, because, the support I was getting from my company just wasn't there. So I wanted to try a different route in my career, still in the dealership space, but focus it more on the technology side of things. So I quit. I left behind all my wonderful dealers and relationships to go work for a technology company out of Philly. Freedom Pay didn't really have much of a presence in the dealership space, but they were really trying to grow an app, a consumer facing app. So they brought me on as a VP of sales. I worked really hard at that job for about 2-ish years, and then they fired me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So then
I've never been fired before.
so how did that feel?
Well, at the time I was 6 months pregnant with my son. So I was angry. Didn't really have a, next job in mind. So with just everything I had, my experience from the past, plus what I learned from Freedom Pay, which was good. I guess, looking back, it wasn't the worst thing. I decided to start DealerPay, 6 months pregnant.
Can you explain to me very simply, like, what problem are you solving today in the industry? And then I want to get into how you wedged into the market and that, but let's just start there. What problem are you solving?
The problem I'm solving is there wasn't a dealership in sight that had a relationship with their payments provider. It was a commodity. It was completely price driven. It wasn't supported. If there were issues with downtime, they didn't have a phone number to call. So what I wanted to do, and sort of my mission when I broke off from Global, was fired from Freedom Pay and started DealerPay, was to actually provide them a solution that provided ways for them to be more productive, more efficient, and save money.
And how did you do that? I'm speaking from, like, I think to, to those days when, getting into issues with, payment acceptance and whatnot. So I can think of some scenarios, but I'm curious to know, what did you specifically do to make that better, easier?
I evolved the standalone terminal into a PC solution, a virtual terminal. So it gave them more ways to process payments and provide better reporting. And it gave them more efficient ways to deliver a payment to a customer. One of the things that was so typical in the industry, and believe it or not, is still very typical, is the cashier's office, right? So everybody sent all the customers down to the cashier office. One of the things that I was able to do was put that process in the hands of finance managers, service managers, parts managers, and even accounting. So really kind of diversify how they were taking payments and make the process faster and more secure.
Got it. And why is that better? Like, why is it better to diversify that? You mentioned faster and more secure, but can you go a level deeper, right? If I'm running a showroom, a dealership, why do I want that?
Because, a standalone terminal doesn't have brains, right? It can process a transaction, typically a card, right? It can spit out a receipt, customer signs a receipt, and you go on your very merry way. What it also provided was a very long and tedious process for the accounting office to be able to reconcile every single transaction in that dealership, every RO, every parts ticket, every deposit down payment. And what it also didn't do is give them any data. So, you've probably experienced this when you were at your stores is, the office managers running around, trying to find what transaction went to what payment, what customer, what RO. Nothing was ever linked. So it was an accounting nightmare, basically.
Yeah. I'm curious. You've been doing this for a decade now. I saw some of the dealers you work with. So what are the top questions dealers ask you, right? Like, what are the key problems that dealers look to solve when they chat with you? Can you stack rank that 1 through 3? What are the top 3 most important questions?
Sure. So the big one is, can you integrate with my DMS? That's the big one.
I swear I was going to ask that one. I swear I was about to ask that one, but go ahead.
That's the big one. Can you save me money? Right. So that's obvious.
How do you respond to that? When someone says, can you save me money? How do you respond?
So yes, I mean, obviously there's some diligence that needs to take place, like getting copies of their statements and doing a full cost analysis. I try to do it from a black and white perspective, but I also try to put some color on it. Like, hey, what if I can save your office 20 hours a week reconciling? What does that look like for you? Versus, hey, this is my rate. This is the rate you're paying today. And this is how much money I can save you. And then obviously, with all the savings programs today with surcharging and cash discount, that's sort of another level of cost savings for a dealer.
Okay, so that was the second question. What was the first question?
Can you integrate with my DMS?
Yeah, and then how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so we integrate with all the major DMSs, even some of the smaller ones, and we're just able to pull over the data. It's all about the data, right? If you did not have these integrations, you've got your users, data entering information. So, obviously there's usually issues with accuracy at some point. So integrating the DMS, there's tons of benefits to the dealership, especially interacting with my point of sale data, security, and just overall process flow. And then all the way back to, how it's going to benefit the consumer who's making the payment.
How are you doing this, right? Like, did you develop some software? Can you give us a little background into that? Like, how are you actually, helping dealers? And I mean, it's just interesting. It's like, feels like such a mundane part of transacting at a dealership. Like, no one focuses on, or the focus is primarily on the sale, right? And what happens before. This is the more like unsexy part, right? So I'm just curious, how are you actually executing this?
Sure. So kind of what I picked up with your question, obviously payment processing, there is nothing really truly sexy about it, but it is the last experience that the customer has at the dealership, right? It's that final payment. So how I started this was initially, branching off from a standalone product. I developed a point of sale solution. So, here's how it happened. I spent several years just listening to problems that dealers were having in each department. So, what I wanted to accomplish was to develop a software program or point of sale that fixed them, right? I couldn't do it myself. So I, of course, hired people to do that, started out contracting. Obviously, now we have a development team, but, identifying where the holes were from sales and finance, which is obviously different from fixed ops, which is obviously different from accounting, et cetera. So I wanted to find the little things they were struggling with today and figure out how I could fix them, make them better, make them faster, make them more secure. So that is really the constant, development process that I've been going through, over the last 10, 15 years.
It's always fun bringing on people to the pod that are solving a very kind of niche problem in the industry, because I would have never thought about this, right? It's like, it's such an afterthought. And I say that with like all the respect to you, like you're tackling, they say riches are in the niches, right? So with that said, drum roll, please. What do you say, right? I got to lead up to it some way. What are you saving? Do you know roughly like, what are you saving a dealership, like in terms of cost, whether that's direct cost or like time savings, which is also a cost? Like, do you know roughly like what you're saving per dealership nowadays?
So when it comes to actual hard costs, like interchange plus assessments plus profits, which is traditionally how payment processing or credit card processing is set up, normally I'm saving them between 10 and 25 basis points.
This episode is brought to you by CDK Global, who will once again be streaming its annual industry conference, CDK Connect 2024, on October 22nd. This year's virtual Connect conference will feature CDK's latest product innovations, a keynote from CEO Brian MacDonald, and live breakout sessions focused across all operations of the dealership. You can register for CDK Connect at the link in our show notes below, or by visiting cdk.com/connect. That's CONNECT, cdk.com/connect. Julie, are you seeing any patterns with dealers that are overpaying? Like, is it specific partners in the industry that are maybe not great? You don't have to name names, or maybe you want to, but I'm just trying to understand, like, is there a common thread with dealers overpaying and also working with, the wrong partner? What is the wrong partner in the space? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So obviously dealers overpaying. I talked about, increasing rates. having the wrong partner is more than just, the expense part of it. It gets into the relationship. It gets into compliance. There's a lot of savings programs out there right now with surcharging and cash discount. And there's companies out there that are leading dealers down the wrong path. And, it's something that's obviously annoying for me because, we push compliance and FTC safeguards and all those things. So dealers really need to make sure that, their payments provider that they're using is following the rules, because there are repercussions and fines and other things that could happen if they're not. So, a lot of dealers are leaving a lot of money on the table with that perspective. Another kind of scary perspective is, a lot of times in my parts departments where they've got a book of credit card numbers. That's just bad. I mean, the breach fines and things that can come from that are just horrific. So I think, educating dealers in ways to, be more savvy with their processes, button up some things from a security perspective. But also, you've got to work with a partner that you trust, because if you don't trust them, you don't know them, I mean, your rates are going to go up. Rates are going to go up. Things are going to change. You're not going to know about it until it's too late.
Julie, what is the average dealership right now paying for processing? Not the average DealerPay dealership, but like the average dealership period.
Between 2 and 2.5% on their volume.
Excluding American Express.
It can include it. It just depends. American Express, traditionally, everybody thinks they're the highest. Really, business and corporate cards are higher than your traditional American Express. But nowadays, with American Express OptBlue program, which if dealers don't have that, they absolutely should, it combines it with the other card brands. So you got a little bit more aggressive rates on those. But yeah, I mean, card brand fees can go up a little north of 3.5%, but on average for dealers with an average ticket somewhere around, 400, 450, then, I would say if you're at 2%, you're good. If you're slightly over, you should call somebody.
Mm-hmm. What's the Blue program? I missed that. You mentioned that dealers should all be on that.
OptBlue. So OptBlue is a program that American Express rolled out a few years ago. Biggest complaints of American Express is, it's a separate statement, it's a separate deposit, and obviously the rates are high. So OptBlue is a way that American Express is able to combine their processing with the other card brands. So it's included in the batch, it's included on the statements, and the rates are quite a bit more competitive compared to the other brands.
What about, just from your experience, I know we were about to touch on this earlier, but any crazy stories you've encountered? I mean, just things sort of like, completely unexpected, or as you've audited dealers, things that you've seen where like, wow, this is just, out of the park, just, very different, weird, bad.
Yeah. So, normally you would think like higher end dealers in a more affluent area would have, a more sophisticated process of evaluating expenses. And credit card processing and payment processing in general are usually in the top 10, right? So you would have thought that process would be more buttoned up in some dealers versus, maybe a smaller geographic with, maybe a lower end car brand. It's not the case. I remember going in, it was a Jaguar dealership, and sitting down with the general manager's desk, he pulls out a statement. I about fell out of my chair when he was paying close to 4%. So, and then, you go, oh my gosh. And the sad thing is he had no idea. But he had if I asked him straight up, who are you using? Oh, well, I don't know, this one company that sends me this bill each month, So that's kind of where, I just realized that you got to know who you're working with, you got to trust who you're working with. And I know that trust word's really hard in the space, but I mean, there's just so many ways and antics that payments companies are taking advantage of their dealers or their merchants, especially with these new savings programs.
Julie, are there any under-discussed ways where you see dealers leaving money on the table?
Well, you'd be surprised that dealers are not auditing their processing fees. And there's many credit card providers out there that raise rates on a pretty regular basis, sometimes even twice a year. So I think that they should really be taking a look at that just to make sure that it is what they originally contracted for with their provider.
Well, let me tell you a secret. You were mentioning dealers not auditing payments. I'll tell you a secret. It gets way worse than that, right? You could see dealers that are, some are much larger, some are much smaller, and the smaller ones maybe have, better reconditioning standards, or better sales training or compliance training. So I think, to your point, it transcends way beyond the back office, and it comes down to management leadership, right? It really starts at the top. But I have seen, I've personally witnessed some, pretty large dealers where the cars, I don't want to say the cars, maybe come from the used cars, come from the auction to get laid on the lot, but it's not far from that. So, standards across the board are definitely not standardized. And, it comes down to, obviously working with the right dealers, which we all know. So.
Right. And I think transparency is kind of a big thing too. There's companies out there now that are, hey, I'm going to save you, $15,000 a month, and we're going to implement surcharging, and it's going to be fantastic. And, nobody really realizes that, that 2% effective rate, they're actually making, 100 basis points, and that's just this kind of, maybe to my detriment, but I don't think so. I think it's actually to my success, as I've been extremely transparent with my dealers. So, to the point where they even know how much money I'm making.
Does anything keep you up at night? Like when you think about the future of your business, this industry, just tell me a little bit about that.
Really just making sure that I'm priced correctly for the market, making sure the products, are worth what I'm selling them for. I personally feel like, we do a great job, and we're more so on the low end than some of our competition. But I also want to make sure that, it is an absolute value for my dealers with respect to the services we provide. But honestly, what wakes me up in the morning is, new development options, new features, different things that I think are going to be more relevant in the industry in the future. We have a lot of fun with, some of the technologies in our program today, but there's just so many more things that we can do. So that's what keeps me excited. But yeah, I just want to make sure that all these features and all these things that we add that are specific to these dealers still creates a great value when it comes to cost.
Now, Julie, one thing I didn't ask you is what's the consumer experience like, right? Because I understand how this helps our industry, but I always think about the customer and can we make their life easier? So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I always tell my dealers that, my customers are, of course, them, but also their customers, right? Because this is the payment from them that they're accepting. So we've done a lot of work just to make that consumer experience as good as possible. I think, and this stems obviously off of COVID because everybody says that, but, the fact of just offering convenience.
I want to ask you a little bit about just anecdotes like from the ground floor. I'm just curious what it's been like working with dealers and sort of the quote unquote scary truths or like what you've seen out there happening that's going to concern you, how you fixed it. I have here, I'm looking at my notes though, and it says to ask you about a shoe. I don't really know what this means, but we'll take a quick pause here and ask you about your shoe strategy. What's your shoe strategy, Julie? Tell me about your shoe strategy.
So early in my sales career, I did some sales training, and it was all about being different, standing out, right? Get someone's attention. When you're selling a commodity at the time, like credit card processing, it was very difficult to get a dealer to even, take your phone call, right? Nobody wanted to talk to me. So I had to be different. So I came up with this strategy where I would send a dealership a shoe in the mail with a note that said, I'm just trying to get my foot in the door.
Oh my God.
I've been using it for 25
You're a beast.
years.
Wow. I feel bad because people are about to take your shoe strategy like crazy right now. Wow. But epic.
It has worked. I've had dealers call me back like as soon as they open the package and were like, can I hire you to sell for me? I'm like, no.
Oh my God. It's funny, like that you just made me realize that there are several people in our industry that have very just, distinct looks, or, they wear something. So like, I'll give you an idea, right? Like Rita Case, her hats, right? Like you see, boom, first thing I thought about. By the way, I thought you were going to tell me the shoes that you wear potentially that were different. And then another one is an Instagram account I enjoy, Benson Bow Ties. So, he works at a dealership and he wears bow ties. So that's, again, unique. Personally, on a personal level, I didn't have any of these unique strategies when I was in sales. And so I went old school. I just smiled. Like I was like a goofball. Like you would see me and I would just smile, like this big ass grin. You're just like, why is this guy looking at me like this? But I didn't know any better. I literally did not know any better. And it's such a disarming thing you can do. Like as a human, when you just look at someone and you just smile, they are, like they let their guard down. It's incredibly effective. Like I'm, obviously speaking from lots of experience, but I highly recommend it. It's a simple one, but it's a very effective one for sales. Okay, well, what does the future look like for your company?
I think it's very bright. I think we're in a position right now where growth is the only way to go. We've accomplished a lot with a very limited staff, and we're ready to really push the envelope and get out more so than just the Midwest and get into some of these other areas of the country, get more of a national presence. This has been a great year because we've landed some really good relationships with some enterprise dealers. I feel comfortable with what we're providing them. And I'm also very excited about sort of what's on the horizon with new developments and new processes for them. That's just kind of been what my passion is. I never, I guess envisioned when I was younger that I would be the payments lady for car dealers, but
I bet you didn't.
But I love it. I mean, it's brought a lot of success to me personally. I've been able to grow a company and see, my staff be successful. So it's rewarding. And, at the end of the day, my dealers are even more successful because of me. So I enjoy what I do.
One of the craziest things about the Car Dealership Guy platform is our direct access to literally thousands of dealership and automotive employees. So naturally, I often hear this question: CDG, can you use your network to help me fill an open role at my company? Well, now I can. Building on the success of my free industry job board, I'm proud to launch CDG Recruiting, a more hands-on white glove automotive recruiting service. Whether you're looking to fill roles in dealership management, C-suite, F&I, fixed ops, auto tech, SaaS, we take the hassle out of hiring by doing the heavy lifting for you. And here's the best part: we vet and screen thousands of candidates so you don't have to. And with our placement guarantee, hiring through CDG Recruiting is 100% worry-free. Our team has decades of experience and has successfully placed over 1,000 roles in the automotive industry. So if you're ready to find your next rockstar employee, try CDG Recruiting today by visiting cdgrecruiting.com or clicking the link in the show notes below. Again, that's cdgrecruiting.com. Are you able to see data on your end of like average down payment or stuff like that? Like if you pull all your dealers together, like can you see trends? Like is average down payment now going back up? Is it down, flat? I'm curious what you know on that end.
Yeah. And I think it depends on the car brand a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it used to be where, it was like $500 and now I've seen 5,000 and even higher. It also used to be where dealers didn't let finance take a credit card down payment for more
Correct.
than like 2,000 or 3,000. And now that's changing as well because there's a way to pass the fees, right? So let that customer put 10 grand down and then, charge them up to 3%, right? So that's changed quite a bit. But, I think sales and finance has always been a little bit careful, I guess is a good word, when it comes to transacting payments on a credit card, just being borrowed money and all.
Yeah. So since like 2020, has that impacted your business? Because like initially I'm thinking that it would have been a boon to your business because prices went up and they outpaced inflation, which means that you're taking a larger VIG, or your percent is the same, but the amount is obviously larger. But I'm curious if has that negatively impacted your business to the point where dealers are like, hey, actually, I'm not accepting credit cards, or I'm curious how that's impacted.
No, it's actually been beneficial for the most part. I did pull some stats for 2024, just to kind of give you an idea what DealerPay is doing. 4 million transactions. 11 billion in volume. One of the things, Josie, I like to point out is we've also saved dealers over 5 million in attempted fraud transactions and savings programs of up to $15.5 million in processing fees saved. So we're pretty proud of those numbers and looking to see those increase as well.
Well, you're doing great work. And if anyone wants to learn more about DealerPay, where can they go to find out?
Oh, well, they can just call me or go to dealer-pay.com for sure.
So dealer-pay.com. We'll put it in the show notes as well. And in terms of calling you, I mean, we could put your phone number in the show notes, but I don't know if you want to do that. I mean, it's up to you. You just might get lots of calls, and I don't know if it'll all be, hopefully it's all people wanting to, discuss DealerPay. But I mean, from experience, you have to wear that ring before you're married. So.
Well, I wear it legitimately now, so. But no, I don't mind. I mean, I'm the president and CEO. Some people call me the sales lady extraordinaire, but really, I handle a lot of what happens at the business. I mean, we have a great sales team, operations. Of course, we have processes, but I just took a call not so long ago from a dealer who had a terminal issue. So I'm wearing all the hats usually.
You're a boutique. You're hands-on. I love it. Julie, thanks for coming on. Had a ton of fun with you. And I'm excited to see you keep growing. So you're doing something very unique that I haven't thought about, but I'll be thinking about it now. So thanks for coming on, Julie.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.